to welcome you to the launch of the Irish Writers Centre Novel Fair 2024 on behalf of my colleagues and myself. This event marks the beginning of Novel Fair 2024, raising the call for our next cohort of talented writers to start fine-tuning their manuscripts in anticipation for the competition deadline, which is the 30th of September. This evening, you'll hear first-hand experiences of the Novel Fair journey, from submission to selection, what happens at the Novel Fair itself, and finally to the process of finding an agent or a publisher and beyond. This discussion will also provide insider tips on how writers might prepare their submissions ahead of the Novel Fair deadline and ways to catch the attention of a Novel Fair judge. The Irish Writers Centre Novel Fair is essentially a literary competition. The prize is the opportunity for the winners to present a synopsis of their novel, the finished novel itself, and biographical material. Leading publishers and agents will be invited to meet these writers in person or through a series of online meetings. So, I'm not going to talk for much longer because I know you really want to talk to our special guests tonight, or you want to listen to them and ask them questions at the end. But just a few figures. It's been 12 years and counting now. So what have we got to show for it? What actually happens to all these Novel Fair winners? There have been 152 Novel Fair winners since its inception in 2011. The Irish Writers Centre Novel Fair was launched in the summer of 2011, and over 570 manuscripts were submitted the first year. 5 of our first class of Novel Fair winners went on to be published. And lots happening in the years in between, but back to 2023 to 2024, 5 more are in the pipeline to be published. Very briefly, Brian Moriarty, Sounds Like Fun, will be published by Hodder tomorrow, 30th of March. Lauren Mackenzie, here tonight. The Couples, Hachette, will be published on the 6th of July, 2023. Alison Langley, Ilona Gets Fun, will be published by Daedalus in November 2023. Orla McKee, Mouthing, by Hamish Hamilton in spring 2024. And Hess Phillips Lightborn by Atlantic Books in 2024. So I think that that's a pretty good track record, and I hope we're enticing you all already. And thank you to everybody in the audience as well. There's lots of you here tonight. I hope we're enticing you to consider entering Novel Fair for 2024. I'm now going to introduce the panelists to you, and then we're going to ask a few questions, and we will have 3/4 of an hour of discussion and then 15 minutes in the end for Q&A. So Joe will be looking after the questions. So submit your questions to the Q&A. And I know people will probably want to chat on the chat function as well. Okay, Lauren Mackenzie, welcome as our special guest at Novel Fair this evening. Lauren grew up in Sydney, Australia, but now lives in Dublin with her family. After a long career as a screenwriter and editor in film and television, she returned to fiction in 2017, completing an MA in creative writing in UCD. She was shortlisted for several literary prizes, published in many journals, and awarded Literature Bursaries by the Arts Council of Ireland. Her debut novel, The Couples, dubbed Normal People for Married People by I think Grania, was a joint winner of the Irish Writers Centre Novel Fair 2021. The Couples is being published by John Murray Press this July, and the TV rights have been optioned by House Productions UK. Grania Fox is a seasoned literary agent with 2 decades of experience representing award-winning novelists, New York Times bestselling journalists, and academics. Before joining United Talent Agency in 2023, she worked at Fletcher & Company for many years, and before that she worked in London with Ed Victor. Her clients have been shortlisted for or won various awards, including the William Hill Sports Book of the Year, the Booker Prize, the Women's Prize, the Irish Book Awards, the British Book Awards, the Orwell Prize, the Plutarch Award, the RTE Short Story Competition, and the NBCC. So, on to Alan McMonagle, was a novel fair judge in 2023 and has written for radio and published 2 collections of short stories, Liar, Liar, and Psychotic Episodes. Hope we don't have any of those this evening. His first novel, Ithaca, was published by Pictor in 2017, and his second novel, Laura Cassidy's Walk of Fame, was published in 2020. So those are our 3 guests tonight, and I am going to start with Lauren. I've said enough, so now Lauren, tell us about your novel, Couples, and tell us also about the process of submitting to Novel Fair and your journey to being published. Over to you, Lauren.
Okay. I'll try and be brief and clear.
Talk away.
The Couples is about 3 couples, all middle-aged, all close friends, who go away for a weekend to celebrate a 48th birthday party. It's set in 2010, and life's pretty tricky with work and careers and unemployment, family, aging parents, and kids and exes. That gets complicated. They have a night with, copious amounts of drink and maybe some drugs, and a game of truth and dare is suggested. There's no obligations, there's no expectations. It's the women's choice. What happens? Some of them can't remember and others can't forget. Mm-hmm. Almost everything they knew to be true of them or thought to be true of themselves and their partners and their friends begins to unravel over the following year. And then, we jump forward 12 years to a wedding. So that's basically the story. It's about love and marriage and desire and how to be authentic in this life when you have, responsibilities to all the other people in your families, in your households. And, what do you do when a close friend offers you everything you hadn't realized you were missing? Mm-hmm. What else I would say? It sort of came about partly being middle-aged and married myself. Obviously, there are some of these issues are, quite familiar to me. But I was struck by a story that my mother told me, some years ago about herself and her friends in 70s Sydney. And they were, it's just after the sexual revolution, they were young parents with kids and so on, and they began to have affairs with permissions or not permissions, but if they were all doing it until one of the married couples fell in love with other people, and immediately everything stopped dead. But as it turns out, now in their 80s, that couple that fell in love with other people are the only ones that are still married and obviously living well. So I was asking myself, what does it take to stay together and stay together well? How do you know when you should leave and when you should hold on? So there was those questions. The other one was, I was always interested in those mad moments, when people act on impulse and, self-sabotage, when everything, they just want to throw it all up in the air and start again. Like that night, the party night, there was nothing sensible about it. We all know that. But in retrospect, some of it was necessary and some of it was inevitable. But that's the story of the couples. Now,
so what made you decide to submit your manuscript to the Novel Fair competition? And how did you find out about it in the first place, actually?
Let's see, if I go back, it's probably had been aware of it, but it wasn't until I met Olivia Fitzsimons at a workshop in Dublin. And she had just got in, I think, 2019.
I rang
And
her to tell her the news.
yeah, and it was hugely exciting. And I watched the process of it, and how how well it was organized, how well she did out of it. As it turns out that she landed with my publisher, or I went with her publisher in the end. And it suddenly looked doable. Now, I had a book that was at like 70,000 words. I thought it was a bit of a mess. I knew what was to happen in the end, but I had gotten to a point where I didn't know how to actually get there. I had some advice from Donald Ryan at that workshop, and he said, just write the final chapter, and then all you have to do is fill in the bit, and then you'll know what to do. Just write the chapter. So I did, and it worked. So by the time I got to September 2020, I know we were in lockdown. Everything had gotten, just distorted and slowed down, and the book was kind of limping along. I entered it partly out of huge optimism, if not, why not me? And I knew I wanted the deadline, as well. So I knew the first 10,000 words was pretty clean, because it had been what I'd worked on for the MA, for the thesis. And I would, sort out the rest of it later on. So I wrote the synopsis, delivered it, and then December 4th came around and I got a phone call, and I actually was too scared to answer it because I thought I didn't know the number, thought it was the Irish Writers Centre.
Oh, it was the bank.
Just looked at it. and then I got myself together, I was with people, and I got into my car, and I rang back about half an hour later, and then I couldn't get through. So I had to ring a few times before I got through and got the word, and I was so deliriously excited by it. Lockdown had been difficult for everyone, and it just was a great, beam of light, just pulled me out of it, total focus. I could ignore the builders who'd been plaguing me next door for the entire time. And I had 6 weeks. I had 6 weeks to polish my draft as best I could. And got my head down, got it together.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm going to leave it there for the moment because we have lots of questions for you already, so I don't want to preempt them. And I'm going to go on to Alan next as the next vital link in the chain of the novel fair. So we have our writers who send in their manuscripts. We have our judges, and Alan, I should have said you're extremely welcome this evening. I asked Alan and he to be a judge for 2023, just got back straight away and said, count me in. So we were thrilled. Tell us about being a judge, Alan. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I did. I was a reader before I was a writer. So yeah, I was immediately keen and curious when I was asked. I think there were 300 entries in total, and I was one of 3 judges. So we split them 3 ways. So I had 100 scripts to read and absorb and discover, and that's part of the big appeal, just finding a new voice, a story told unlike any story you've read or heard before. And one thing, because like for me, good writing, it's about listening to a voice, and the entries that most stood out for me, they were the ones that had distinctive voices. There were loud voices, quiet voices, playful, edgy voices, humorous and vulnerable voices that told familiar stories in new ways. Voices that took me on a journey. And that's what I probably most enjoyed about the process.
This is stuck in my mind from last year, speaking to Gavin Corbett. I think he read 130 manuscripts. So he reckoned that was 1.3 million words.
Wow.
And it took up a lot of his time, but he said it was a reading pleasure. And I'm getting the impression that you felt the same way. But I just, from the point of view of being a judge, and for people who are listening in this evening, who think that they will submit a manuscript for 2024, at what stage do you expect a manuscript to be when reading it as a judge?
Well,
Polished or a diamond in the rough?
we're tasked with reading these 10,000 word excerpts from a manuscript, whether that's the opening 10,000 words or maybe somewhere in between into the narrative. But really, in a nutshell, I want it to be the best possible version of itself. Like there are no shortcuts to publication. Writing is a long way, and every day is the first day, and that's been my credo for a long time. Just to go back, of the batch of entries that I read and really went for, it was quickly clear to me that that the relevant writer had put in a lot of effort. Voice again, point of view, narrative, momentum, characterization, language, story. All of these ingredients, that were on display right from the get-go.
That was my next question. Did you know on the first reading which would be your final choices?
Well, we had to, from each of our batch of 100, we had to choose 12 each that would form an initial long list of 36 that would be subsequently whittled down to 24 and then to 12. I mean, you have a gut feeling about certain narratives. The control is on display right from the get-go. You just feel that the writer has put a hell of a lot of effort in, and to the extent that indeed at times I felt that I didn't notice that I was reading. And that's always a good sign. And it's so worth bearing in mind that a lot of effort goes into making a piece of writing look effortless. So you were almost feeling it before you knew it, and they were it's nice. It's a nice feeling because it's instinctive at this stage.
It's worth explaining at this stage as well that each judge chooses 12 manuscripts, so that there's 36 in the mix, and then you get together and have a summit and pick the 12 winners. But there's also 12 runners up and 12 highly commended. So they get short critiques from the judges for being runners up and being highly commended. So, and that's very encouraging as well. That's the feedback that I get from people. And there's one thing I wanted to ask you about, and I'll be asking Grania about this as well shortly. The synopsis. How important is that?
Well, I tell you, there's no question like a guarantee to elicit instant cheers from a writer. That what is it about? Like I hate doing synopsis. I really do, but I have done them, and I've tried to see the positives in them. For those who like to plot, it really is an opportunity to say succinctly what your novel is about. And for those non-plotters out there, and I'm very much in this camp, it's actually an opportunity to discover what your novel is about. And into the bargain, it's also a mini masterclass in the rudiments of clarity, concision, brevity, precision. These are all good writing skills to acquire and develop. What I would, if anybody is interested, I would keep it to one page. I don't know.
It's 300 words for the novel fair.
I would break that down maybe into 3 shortish paragraphs. Keep it double spaced, short declarative sentences. It might take a few runs to get it right. Actually, scratch that. It will take a few runs to get it right. But
it is very important, I think.
I think it will be worth it. Yeah.
And one question that we often get, Alan, I'd like to hear your take on it. People say, you know, they submit 10,000 words. Should it be the first 10,000 words, or is it okay to kind of the first chapter and the last chapter if they have it? Or would you just prefer to, would you get a better sense of the novel by a continuous, say, chapter 1, 2, and 3?
Well, again, I'm probably speaking for myself as a writer who so enjoys beginnings, you know, that initial spark that prompts or spurs certainly a modicum of narrative momentum and onward thrust. So I would personally, prefer to see 3 continuous chapters. And indeed the beginning, you know, because you're setting out your stall, you're giving us as soon as possible a flavor of the hinterland and the landscape and the cast of the story that you're about to tell us, of the journey you're about to take us on. My inclination would be to give us the beginning, to give, if not at the very least, 3 continuous chapters.
Thank you. And I should mention at this stage as well, of course, the manuscripts are judged anonymously. So the judges don't know anything at all about the person who's writing the novel, where they're from, whether they're male or female, whether, you know, there's absolutely nothing to show them. And so it's always a pleasant surprise for the judges in the end to find out who they've been, who they've offered the 12 winning places to. Thanks, Alan. And I'm going to go on to Grania now. And just my first question for you, Grania, and you're very, very welcome. And thank you for being here this evening. You've been to the Novel Fair several times now. Yeah. What keeps you coming back to this competition, this unique competition, I might say?
Unique competition. Well, I have an abiding love for Irish writers, and I have noticed over the past few years that the Irish Writers Centre is great at attracting international writers. So not just Irish writers, it's people from all over the place. I'm based in New York. I used to work in London, so I have a very international kind of sensibility, and it's important for me to not only be in one sort of bucket of identity. And what's really great about the Novel Fair is that these writers have done a lot of work in order to be able to present their work in this way. And so it's very polished. All of the writers that I speak to, and I did the Novel Fair just in February, they have a great command of their material. They know how to talk about it. And that's honestly sometimes half the battle. And especially when you're talking about a novel. And like Alan referenced, it's, you know, authors like, well, what's it about? Well, it's about life and things that go wrong or whatever, unless it's a very obvious sort of high concept novel. Yeah. And what I enjoy about attending the fair is that it's just an opportunity to chat to these writers who are very ready for the marketplace. And that's an exciting point.
Yes, Grania. And by the way, there's a lovely article in the Irish Times today. It's conversation with Lauren and Grania. And as it turns out, Grania met Lauren when Grania met Lauren at the Novel Fair in 2021, wasn't it, Lauren? And you became Lauren's agent.
Yes, I did. Well, do you want to go first, Lauren, or shall I?
I want to ask you first of all, sorry, Lauren. I just wanted to ask you, what stood out about Lauren? What was it? Was it her synopsis? This is for you, Grania. Can you remember? You know, this is for people who, I'll say first of all, we have part of the prize for being a winner in Novel Fair. So we have a half-day prep day where we'll say one of the judges, a former Novel Fair winner, an agent / publisher, will prep the 12 winners for pitching their novel to the publisher and agent. So did you find that we'll say Lauren, for example, stood out head and shoulders with her pitch?
Well, I just think when Lauren and I started to talk to each other, she told me about her novel and I asked questions, and we just seemed to sort of vibe on what she was writing about. I could relate to it in some ways because I'm also married and have children and in-laws and friends groups, but it's not that I'm conducting an affair with any of my friends groups. I'll just say that now, just to be clear.
Sorry, me neither.
No one is.
So we got on well in conversation, and this is the trick. Any relationship you have with a writer and vice versa with an agent, the chemistry of your personality has to match.
Yeah.
Oh, I loved how Lauren was talking about her work, and then the synopsis didn't come into it because I was either going to read the first 3 chapters and want to read more. And that's where the synopsis can be helpful to figure out where does the story go and what happens in the end. But for me, and it's similar to how editors sometimes feel, they don't care about reading fiction is an emotional experience. And how I felt when I read Lauren's book was what made me want to work with her and represent her. And so it wasn't the synopsis, it wasn't, when I send a book to editors, sometimes they don't look at the letter that I've agonized over and the pitch. They just simply want to engage with the pages and see how they feel and if they want to read on. And so that is the trick. And the 3 chapters has to make you want to read on. And that's
So we get asked this question a lot, what does a literary agent actually do? Just wanted to check, you were working for Fletcher & Co. when, and was, so you were a publisher then and you're working for an agency now? No, I got that wrong.
It was an agency and we got acquired at the end of last year by a bigger agency.
Yeah. Okay. So, will you tell us a little bit about, and in the context of Lauren's book, maybe, what a literary agent actually does? So, you've met Lauren, you read the manuscript. What's the next step?
Well, Lauren had another agent who wanted to represent her, so I had to assert myself very quickly. And then we worked, because Lauren, you were quite busy with your screenwriting at the time, and you had various different deadlines. So we had to operate around your day job, as it were. And then we worked on the manuscript for a little while. We figured out a title that we submitted the novel under. And my job was to really get it to the point where the author is exhausted and can't look at it anymore. That's pretty much my first port of call. Because then I know it's ready for other people to read and to assess. And so we sent it out to publishers, and that part of my job is the most exciting bit after discovering a fresh new talent, of course, but it's deciding who the editors are, what they've worked on in the past and why they're a good fit. And so that's what we did. And after the deal, that's only the beginning of an agency. That's the first step, is to find the right publisher. And then it's to navigate the publishing process from the soup to the nuts. It's like, here's the cover. What do we think about it? What's the positioning? How do we talk about this novel so that it's considered for its literary merit as much as it is a very juicy book club novel that lots of people will want to read? So how do we highlight the fact that it's superbly written as much as it's compelling to read?
Thank you very much, Grania. We've a load of questions coming in. Lauren, did you just want to chime in there quickly to say something about that relationship?
Absolutely love what Grania is saying. It's very true that when we met each other, we hit it off immediately. And I've worked in the TV and film industries, and I've done many jobs, and mostly, you know, you're trying to pay the mortgage, so you do the job, right?
Yeah.
It became clearer and clearer to me as time went on that who you work with is just hugely important. That it affects the quality of the work you produce is who you work with. So for me, choosing an agent, I wanted an agent that I really liked, that I really wanted to work with. I suppose what I'm saying is, I wouldn't go with any agent. Like, you've got to find someone who works with you, and then it'll be a pleasure, and hopefully, succeed.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Lauren. I'm just going to quickly talk about a few the logistics really of the whole novel fair experience, and then we might go to questions shortly after that. So I've mentioned the prep day. So I saw a question earlier on about, are we going to continue with an online version of the novel fair? So we are. It's working out really well. So on February the 17th, I think, was it, Joe? On the Friday, for the first time in 3 years, we had an in-person novel fair here at the Irish Writers Centre. It's a fabulous day. And all 12 of the people, the finalists, managed to get here. And I think we had about 10 publishers and agents in the centre on the day, and 2 more upstairs on laptops. I mean, they were appearing remotely, and everything went smoothly. It's a hell of a logistic nightmare, but it was it's great, to when a plan works out like that. And then the next day we had the remote version. So I want to stress that has absolutely opened up the novel fair competition to be a totally international competition now. You can enter it from any place in the world, and you can be a publisher and agent from any place in the world as well. And I'm sure Grania will confirm that we're very accommodating, in that we look at the different time zones and everything as well, and just make things as easy as possible for people to join in. Submissions for Novel Fair 2024 will open on the 1st of September and close on the 30th of September. Very narrow window, so start getting your manuscripts ready now, and submissions will be via Submittable. There's a list of terms and conditions on the website, and just to let you know that the timeline really is the competition submissions end on the 30th of September, and then you will get the phone call if you're a winner the first week in December 2023, and then you have to have your 50,000 words into the Irish Writers Centre in a week from that time. So you need to be absolutely sure that you're going to have 50,000 words ready by the second week in December if you're entering the novel fair, because it's going to just be so frustrating for you if you're a winner and you can't commit to having the 50,000 words. Okay, I'm going to just go to the 3 panelists again to ask you just to give your best advice from your own experience of being a judge, a publisher, and a novel fair winner, for people going forward to enter the novel fair in 2024. And I'm going to ask you first of all, Alan. I know you've given us the benefit of your wisdom already.
Oh. Yeah. Let me see. I suppose. I mean, there's lots of things that I could say in and around writing, but vis-a-vis the novel fair per se, and what I would say to any budding entrants, don't feel that you need to second guess what potential judges, agents, or publishers might be looking for. I would say to you all, write the novel that's of interest to you at this time. Write the novel that you want to read at this time. if you're getting something from your writing, there's every chance that someone else will too. And that someone might be in a position to help your writerly cause. So have faith in your own work, and know the chase and cut to it.
Nice one. Just a little bit of a technical question. If the grammar is bad and the spelling is bad, and it's like somebody hasn't really made an effort to send in again, I'll use the word polished, but does that put you off?
If it's ongoing,
is it important?
If it's ongoing and persistent, yeah, I mean, you will assume that the writer hasn't taken the time to proofread their piece. I work in the kitchen here in the house I live in, because I constantly pace and read aloud what I do. You catch the bum notes, you catch the typos, you catch the missing quotation marks. So yeah, I mean, you can't read a piece of your own writing enough times. So obviously, human nature will prevail. There's going to be the occasional typo.
Yeah.
That's what that which is expected, but yeah, not on every page. It is a put off, yeah.
Thanks, Alan. Lauren, could you give us just a few thoughts?
Deadlines are your friend. Absolutely.
You're not the first person who said that about novel.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Deadlines are your friend. You can get a lot more done than you think in a short space of time. I'd say about, while yes, I agree, typos and grammar, and I think everybody, there's word programs and everything can be picked up if you want. I'd like try to make it as good as it can be, your submission, your initial submission, and then ultimately the book that you're sending out. But being as good as it could be isn't necessarily about writing perfect sentences at this stage. It's about ideas and be aware of about your idea in the first place. And it's not necessarily that it has to be wildly original, but be clear about what the idea is. And if there is something that is slightly, whether it's the setting or the age of the characters or the problem that they have that's slightly different, I would emphasize that in your initial submission, and then later on in your pitch, like that it's your hook. Basically, like try and find a hook, even for your low-key, tiny, like, I don't know what kind of novel. I'm thinking of Duck's Newburyport, like it start to it like an extraordinary piece of writing, but nothing happens.
Are you an avid reader, Lauren?
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to read. You've got to read. I just can't read fast enough.
Okay, thanks a million. And Grania, who I should emphasize again, is a literary agent.
Thank you. I wouldn't be able to cope if I was a publisher. I would say my advice is to go for it and to be realistic. And so what it means to be realistic is practice how you talk about your work in very realistic terms. No one wants to hear someone comparing their novel to, like, it's Anna Karenina meets Sophie's Choice, because there is no such thing. And be confident, though, too, in what you're doing. And that will always shine through on the page and in the conversation. So it's being realistic, confident,
authentic.
Yeah.
Okay, Joe, how are we doing for questions?
Hi, yes, we have quite a few coming in. For Lauren here, Finola would like to know if you had any advice. So how how finished your novel was when you applied to the novel fair. Was it in draft form, or how polished was it? And whether you had any advice about your pitch as well. How do you make it super?
I had the full draft when I applied in September. There were bits of it I wasn't happy with, and I knew needed work. I like lots of it, but it was a bit. The draft was there. I knew what the book was, and so from September to December, I was still working on it whenever I could. And the process from December to February, I wanted it to be. I thought, to me, it was important that the book was as ready as it could be, so that if somebody asked to read it just at the novel fair, I was ready to send it out immediately, rather than asking them to wait while I finished it off a bit more, So I worked full time on it for the 6 weeks. I cleared the decks, and I had a friend reading along the way. I did have to say to her, please, I only want notes about things that I can fix now.
Yeah.
I can't afford to be waylaid, by half of it doesn't work or anything like that. And that was great. And I picked the right person. So pick the right person for your reader. I think you absolutely should have someone read it. But as you know, it's like when we went through more drafts with like Grania and myself, and then it's picked up by the publisher, and we went through more drafts again. So I mean, it's a long way from my initial draft in the September to the published book. And probably I'd still change things. I absolutely would still change things.
Well, we're looking forward to that launch, Lauren.
Yeah.
It's probably worth saying at this stage as well that one of the terms and conditions is that your novel that you submit, manuscript, shouldn't be professionally edited. So again, it's fine to get to have somebody read it or whatever. So thanks, Lauren. Joe.
Yeah, so we have another question from Afrik, who would like to know if the opening chapters have already been published in a journal, can you still submit it to the novel?
You can, because it's not a published novel. The whole thing, if it's been published as a novel, obviously you can't submit it. But I think they're probably, if you're submitting individual chapters, it's not. It's probably like an article or something like that. Okay.
We also have a lot of questions on whether there's a maximum in terms of the bigger manuscript that you end up submitting. So we've got questions about whether can you go over 50,000, but also can you go under 50,000? So it'd be good to clarify that.
Well, you have to send in 50,000 words if you're one of the 12 Novel Fair winners. So unless by the time it goes to the agent and the publisher, I mean, that's nothing to kind of do with the Novel Fair in the end then. Grania, is there like, what kind of a word count with novels in general these days, or is there any?
I mean, it's the impossible question, because certain novels can be devastatingly short and compact and brilliant in that way. And then the others you could keep on reading them for the rest of your life. So there's no ideal. Between 60 and 100,000 words. 100,000 words is probably a long feeling, but there's no rhyme or reason to it.
Yeah.
Okay. We also got a question about elaborating on what actually happens on the day of the fair, and whether it's like speed dating and the writers move from table to table to pitch their novel.
Okay, so are we talking about the in-person event, or are we talking about online? Because they're kind of two different.
I think the whole weekend.
So it's for the in-person event, each winner is assigned a table. So they stay at that table, and the publishers and agents move around to them. They have 15 minutes to pitch, and we have some lunch provided as well. But after 15 minutes, we ring a bell just so that they know the time is up, and then the publishers and agents move on to the next table. In the online version, it's each publisher and agent has their own Zoom account. So the writers get sent the Zoom link. So the publishers and agents stay at the one Zoom link, obviously, all day, and the writers move around to them. Does that make sense? I think that probably. Lauren, have you anything to say about your own experience of the day when, again, you were online, weren't you?
Sorry.
Okay.
We were completely online, so two full days online every 15 minutes. It was very tiring.
Yeah.
But it actually, my pitch refined, throughout the day. I got better at it, and I worked out what was, coming across or not. And I think Ronnie was at the end of the day, so maybe that's all it was in the end. And I think we were kind of lucky in that we all, COVID broke the ice, and there was a certain vulnerability, I think, at that time, meeting up like this and trying to do something, ordinary, or, super ordinary in those times. That worked. I would have loved for it to have been in person. But,
were you very nervous beforehand?
Yes. Yes.
And there's one thing I wanted to add at this stage as well, and somebody from last year asked me to always stress that, like, people are related, the winners are related, because it's a huge adrenaline rush. And, I mean, if you want to be a writer, you're getting a unique opportunity. So it's this fierce excitement and, everything for the duration of the novel fair. But there's a bit of a crash afterwards if you're getting a lot of rejections and that. And we always like to talk about the slow burn. We have somebody at the moment who is maybe Novel Fair 2019 and being published now. And we'll have a blog post on our website. Is it tomorrow, Joe?
Yeah.
The 30 Novel Fair books that have been published. And you'll see that from, we might be able to have the date of publication, and they'll be in chronological order from the year that they won Novel Fair. So you can see that some people get published within a year, and and other people might be 3 or 4 years. But don't lose heart, and don't get down afterwards, because the one thing we would say as well is that Novel Fair is an impressive competition to win, and it opens doors in different ways as well. Would you agree, Grania? Because you see that on somebody's writer's CV, and that the standard of their work is going to be high.
Absolutely. It means that you as a writer are very serious about your work, and you have to, as an agent, you're being professional in how you consider material, and you want the writers you work with to be similarly professional. And so it's a great sort of stamp of approval that you've been through this process. Yeah. And also to add, writing novels is a long game.
Yeah.
And it's riddled with peaks and troughs and celebrations, and one bad review can send you over the edge, and then you might win a prize. No one ever knows. It's a lottery. So don't lose heart. Absolutely.
Alan, do you have anything to add there about your own publishing? Sorry,
yeah, it's just sorry, I've interrupted. Grania, there is that point that I never knew. Publishers have to have a window for releasing your book. And that could push you out into, 18 months, 2 years from when they sign it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
publishing
that's
is
the point as
slow.
well.
Publishing is way slow. So there's that too.
Yeah.
Alan,
Yeah, and I well remember, I think another one of your writers, Grania, Nuala Ní Crohor, or Nuala O'Connor, as she's more commonly known these days. I mean, when I did the MA in writing here in Galway, she came to speak to us, and I remember her saying, writers develop at a glacial pace, I remember writing that down in my journal at the time.
Yes.
Saying it back to her on more than one occasion. And it's a slow game, it's a long game. And the whole business around publishing, it's mysterious.
but it's so worth it at the end, of course.
It is its own reward. I mean, obviously, we have to figure out ways to eke out an existence out of it and all of that. But and like you were saying about, what one book flies and another book doesn't. I was speaking to Des Kenny here in Galway. He's been selling books for 50 years, I would say. And he will point out 2 books on his bookshelf, similar in thematic considerations and characterizations and all of that. And one is flying off the shelf and one isn't. And he cannot explain why.
So and there are trends as well as
yeah.
Joe, thanks very much, Alan. I'm looking at the list of questions here. Joe, keep interrupting me because I keep talking until the cows come home.
Of course, no worries. Yeah, we've got getting a lot of questions in, but yeah, it's good to say we'll try and answer your questions afterwards as well, and you can always email us as well. But there's a lot asking about if there is a sort of type of genre or that works best for the novel fair format, or if in the past have you had fantasy novels, children's novels. Yeah, is there anything you can say about the types of genres that people submit?
I'd say this from a judge's point of view, and you'll agree with me, Alan. Remember, there are 3 different judges judging each year with 3 different perspectives, 3 different, Alan, what would you say from the point of view of somebody who's been a judge? And I'm sure it's not the first time you have been.
Again, I'm probably going to repeat what I said in my tip. Write the novel that's of interest to you at this time. Write the novel that you're inspired to write at this time, that you want to read at this time. Don't worry about, you cannot know anyway. Judges, editors, publishers, agents, sensibilities and preferences. I mean, as I said, there were 3 of us, 300 manuscripts, give or take 100 each. Everything from high fantasy to gritty realism. What grabs me is persuasive writing. Again, that word Ronan used, confident writing. Strong voices, captivating voices, persuasive voices. Writing that makes you want to read on. The genre doesn't matter. Whether it's intricately plotted or a Dux Newbury style, just goes for hundreds of pages without anything happening. If the writing is compelling enough, we will want to read on, and we will read on, and the writers will get rewarded for the efforts that they put in.
Thanks, Alan. Grania, you want to get in there?
I'd add to that as well, that you never know what an agent has just tried to sell and maybe failed to sell, or might have missed out on something and wanted to do that time travel novel or whatever. So it's like, again, we are readers first. And if I have, for example, taken on too many historical novels in the past year, and if it's been hard to try and figure out how to sell them or how to position them in the marketplace, chances are I might not be desperate to find another historical novel. And then, of course, I'll read something and it'll be wonderful and I'll just fall in love all over again. So there's no rhyme or reason to it. Publishers only know the trends as they've happened. It's very hard for them to predict the trends. Everyone right now is chasing rom-coms and love stories because the world is in a terrible state of chassis. So there's that. And, you know, do with that what you will. Like Alan, you've said, you have to write the book that you can write. It would do no harm to be aware of what's happening in the industry insofar as you can be aware. As an outsider, you know, you're trying to gain knowledge into what the business of publishing is like, because this is the first step of like the business of getting published is quite a thing. And it would do no harm to make yourself, to familiarize yourself with what's selling, what's been acquired, you know, all that kind of stuff. And that's like trade magazines and trade going to read. And there's so many launch parties in Dublin. It's a really wonderful sort of oasis of access, truly.
Thanks, Claudia. All right, Joe.
Yes. Yeah, I just got a question from Colin. This is for Grania, and he's a Irish writer living in the US. And would you compare how would you compare the paths to publication in Ireland and the US?
There's not really a direct comparison I can make. The US market is just so much bigger. It's a vast kind of business in as it is also a vast sort of landscape. So there's just so many more publishers here. There's so much more competition as a result. But the Irish and the UK publishing scene is it's far more intimate, I would say. The Irish publishers all know each other. They all know how to launch a book like nobody's business. One of my authors, Alan, you've already name-checked her, Nuala O'Connor, was lucky in that she got the One Dublin One Book accolade last year. And that's been phenomenal for her work and for championing that novel at that time. And there's not a similar kind of competition or prize. Like prizes always help. And certainly in the UK market, they help sort of exponentially. Whereas over here, it's the book clubs and the celebrity book clubs that really make the difference.
Very true. Thanks, Grania. Joe.
We have a question from Peter who says, if your entry is the first novel in a planned series, is it important to detail in the synopses where the story would be going? Would it be better to enter only standalone novels?
Grania.
I'd be very, if it's the first in a planned series, that's great. And you should absolutely sort of have a sense of where it's going on the basis that people only will buy book 2 if book 1 is successful. So a trilogy is a very hard thing to get right. But if that's your idea and if that is your character and that's the universe you're building, then absolutely sort of a couple of lines about what happens in book 2 and what happens in book 3, not extensive, I wouldn't say, because it all has to start with book 1.
Exactly. There won't be a book 2 and 3 if book 1 doesn't take off. Okay, thank you, Grania. Joe, gosh, we're running out of time already.
So I had a question on how many people read the initial sort of 10,000 word manuscripts. How many judges read?
So one judge reads if you have 300 manuscripts submitted, they're divided between the 3 judges who will read 100 each. Does that answer that question? So it's just one judge, and then, as I said earlier on, they will choose 12 each, and then they will read 24 more manuscripts. That's the other 2 judges, 12 manuscripts, and then they'll come together like electing the Pope. They'll have a summit. They will pick the 12 winners. Okay.
I've just yeah, I think that's all with the questions. But yeah, just to reframe that, we will if you do email us, you can answer your queries as well.
So we have gone through as many questions as we have there. So that's grand. That brings us very neatly to 8 o'clock. And look out for the blog post. Joe, did you put the link to the Irish Times article in the chat?
I'll do that now.
Okay. So thank you so much to our 3 panelists. It was really interesting. I could talk for another hour or more about it. Would any of you like to say anything before we leave it here this evening? Or have we given enough pearls of wisdom for the moment? Lauren.
I would tell everybody to enter. If you started writing now, you could have a rough draft by September, or close enough to it. It is, I mean, I know that sounds a bit right. You want to go in with the best possible chance, but at the same time, you know, just jump in. I don't think there's anything to lose. There's a lot to learn in the process along the way. And if it doesn't happen this time, do it next year. It's been absolutely wonderful for what it did for me personally, for validation, and then actually the practicalities of it, you know, meeting Grania and then being published and so on. But also the community is really important, that meeting all the other writers in the same situation with the novel fair, the WhatsApp group, and where we all cheer each other on or actually share information about publishers as well, you know, along the way. But you know, that's really important. Like find your people. It's better not to go this way. That walk this path alone. It's much easier.
I should actually make the point at this stage. You just reminded me, when the 12 winners send in their 50,000 words to in the week following the phone call, we at the Irish Writers Centre don't read those manuscripts. So you just have to send in the 50,000 words to prove that you have a full novel, but you have loads and loads of time between then and February, the end of February, to hone your novel, to edit, rewrite, and everything else. So when we're saying about having the 50,000 words for December, don't panic, because you still have a chance. And also, when the publishers and agents meet you on the day, they're going to ask to see your manuscript. Send it in the next week or so. So you still even have another little bit of leeway at that stage. That makes sense. Okay, then. That's it, I think. We'll wrap up. Thank you, Grania. And it's probably time for your lunch now in New York.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alan. How are things in Galway? Better weather than here, I hope.
Yeah. Maybe.
And Lauren, you're in Dublin, I think.
I am.
Thank you very much. And we'll see you soon, hopefully. See you in July anyway.
Oh, absolutely.
And if anyone has any questions, thank you so much to the audience as well. We had a fantastically big crowd here attending the launch tonight. Any questions that we haven't answered, feel free to send them into novelfair@writerscentre.ie, and we'll get back to you in the next week or so. And look out for the blog as well, telling you more about Novel Fair. And Joe, I think you'll be doing lots of social media around it, leading up to the submission stage in September. So we look forward to that as well. All right then. Thank you all very much. Good night.